The other thing I think is really quite interesting is digital. You know, we all talk about digital, we all think we know what it is. I would say to you, just take a little bit of time to think about it. I saw on Finextra this morning, actually, someone called it the Kodak moment for banks. And I don't think that's over-exaggerating. The whole concept of digital, I think, is that we need to stop thinking about the bank and start thinking about how we connect into the wider ecosystem. And actually, what impact's that going to have on us when the customers actually no longer want to see us anymore because we haven't got a differentiated product? And I think you may argue with me on that, but actually when you really take it down to its basics, we need to make sure we have that differentiation within the banking industry, or we're in real trouble. Other industries have done this many years ago. This is a revolution, industrial revolution for us in financial services. So again, we really need to rethink this, and many people are still thinking about the impact of, does it go mobile, or do I connect the process together? This has fundamental implications for us. And what I wanted to do today was just give you a few insights as to what we're thinking about in this. So you may say, SAP, big company, lots of customers, big multinationals, why are you interested in this? And the first thing I'd say to you is 70% of our customers are actually SMEs. We run 29 industry solution sets. Yes, we are very big in large corporates, so we run 56% of the large corporate market. Most of those started as small companies, and actually now, like I said, the focus for us is to get all the way down the value chain, because we know how important it is to be with those customers and grow them. The number one customer we had, which was ICI, right back at our foundation in the 70s, we still have as a customer. It's important that you keep those customers all the way through that journey. So again, why are we interested in this particular segment? And I think one thing that we've always been very keen on is, how do you actually understand the whole infrastructure and the value chain of your customers, and increasingly your customers' customers? So for us, you know, we have to go all the way back to the actual consumer, into some of the small businesses, and then how we actually take that through into large businesses as well. So again, it's important for us to be a part of that. And I think as we get more and more into the cloud, that's going to become more increasingly important as well, because we need to connect up those business networks. And in the end, it always touches a customer. For us, we need to play all the way through that value chain. So again, what's changed, I think, if you look at the environment, if you look at this business that we've been in for many, many years, you know, why should we be looking at SMEs a little bit differently? And I think we've touched on this in certain parts of the presentations today, and I was also interested to see Santander's investment in Cabbage, as we mentioned it there. But this is what we're facing. So it's not just about that relationship and making sure we're more in tune with it. It's also the speed of change that we need to cope with as well. We don't have, or we won't have in the future, the time to do the innovation that we need to keep our customers current. You know, even big banks cannot cope with the speed of change that's going to be required in this market. And I think more and more we're realizing that the value chain of the end-to-end distribution of the services that we provide, you can't do it all yourself. It's too expensive, it takes too long, your people don't have the right skills, you don't have the right innovation in many cases to keep up with the market. And that's the message I'm getting increasingly from CEOs, that really we've got to focus on the areas we're good at. I think the very clever organizations at the moment are also looking at, in that value chain, how do I break that up into 4 areas? Because at the moment I'm doing everything. And if I'm doing everything, I'm not efficient. So how do I break that up? So there's some things obviously that are utility processes. How do I take those utility processes and actually make sure that I make them as efficient as possible? Are there things that I could outsource to other people that are better at that particular role? Yes, no? If there are, let's get them out. Are there things that I'm really good at from that type of process that I could take in things from other people in that collaborative environment? Yes, no? And then really, when you actually look at it, what's my differentiator? What areas am I looking at that I'm specifically good at, that I can really get an advantage in that marketplace? And those are the ones that my customers are going to understand. I love that Digital Eagle piece. And actually, I've got a close association with that. The lady in my local Barclays branch actually taught my mum to use a computer. So I absolutely thought that was a tremendous advert, one that Chris showed there earlier. You know, people are there, they're able just to say, you know, I've seen that advert, can you help me? and they can. And that really, I think, is giving something back to the community. So what's that differentiator that you have, like I said, that makes you different from the rest of the market? So if we look at cabbage here, and again, I know we've probably covered this in many sort of different instances, but it takes them 7 minutes to set up a loan. That's around 5,000 times faster than many of the high street banks. Again, just one example. I don't know if you've seen how they do it, but they link it to PayPal, etc. So yes, they don't have the KYC pieces. Yes, they don't have some of the other elements of it. But that's the type of people that are coming in, eating up that value chain. And that's why I said that's what we need to be looking at, is to make sure that we concentrate on the bits where we really are adding value to our customers. Something else is also going on. If you look at internet and banking, it's currently 30% of the global interactions with SME clients. And we're set to see that going up to 60%. I believe that's an Efma statistic there. But again, I think the really important piece here is that distance between you and the customers is going to get larger. One of the C-level guys that I met up with fairly recently, I can't tell you who it was, but he said to me, we need to get closer to our customers, we need to delight them more. And my question to him was, what if they don't want to be delighted anymore? And he couldn't answer the question. For 300 years, that relationship's been very close. Yes, we need to get closer to them. Yes, we need to have those shoulder-to-shoulder conversations. But in many cases, people also want to do more and more of this themselves in a way that's easy to consume. They don't have to have training. They're able just to do it when and when they want it. As we all know, running a small business is an incredibly difficult thing to do, right? You are the center of everything, and you don't have that large staff around you to be able to do many of the tasks that you need to do. So maybe these sorts of things, when they're interacting, are done in the evening. We've got some interesting statistics for some of the organizations we deal with now, and they can actually map when people engage with them across the life cycle. So in the morning it tends to be a phone, in the mid-morning it's a PC, and then come into sort of evening and people are doing tablets. And actually when they've mapped it all, it's now an operation that you do in conjunction with something else quite often. So they're doing it while they're watching the television, or doing it while they're traveling, or doing it some other sort of area. The time that we have for face-to-face is reducing every single time. So how do we take advantage of that whilst not losing that relationship as well? So again, we see some great things about the face-to-face pieces, but we need to make sure we don't lose sight of those others. Otherwise, we're going to be in real trouble, I think, going forward. And that's what people in other industries have realized many, many times and many, many years ago. So what we look at is we look at how business is being reinvented now. And again, going back to those 4 things that I mentioned, so the ability to have the sort of, the utility processes, the things that we should insource and outsource, and the ability also to look at where the real value is being generated in an organization. We also need to be able to make and break those value chains. It's no longer okay to say, I've got this great piece of development, and I'm putting it in now, and it's going to stay there. The whole point of this now is the whole infrastructure needs to be much more fluid. If this year it's good to get into this particular product, that's fine. Next year you may be out of it. The following year you may be working in partnership with somebody. That partnership may then dissolve. You maybe find someone else in the market where you actually do a part acquisition and you do another collaboration with somebody else. That we call that digital core. So for us, we see that whole digital core interaction is how we want to deal with the internal operations and the internal ability for our organization to work out what we insource, what we outsource, what we process, and where our real value adds in that particular digital core. But we also need the handoff with how we deal with other parts of the organization. And you'll see that coming out in the sort of spokes there. So the workforce. How do we make sure that that workforce is absolutely working for us and for our customers, and that it has everything it needs at that fingertip time? I was working with an Australian bank actually in my previous role a few months ago, and they have a real concept of taking the customer off the market early. And what they're saying is, actually we want to take them off the market before they actually even have a chance to think about doing something else. That is quite a difficult thing to compete against once you really have that. If you can get that intimacy with your customer, if you can really build that type of relationship, it makes it very difficult for other people to get in there. And again, that's a key part of that component. To do that though, you need to make sure that the systems that you have supporting that are real-time, are online. You have the analytics to be able to understand and engage and enact with them. Most people in this room, I'm sure, will have IT departments that say they can do that. Actually, you and I both know that's not true. I spent many years, as we said previously, in Barclays working for them, Woolwich before that, in Lloyds Bank, HSBC. I also did a branch front end for a Chinese bank as well. So I can tell you I've seen systems from all different sides, and we're nowhere near that type of tight connection between what we know about all of our customers and how we can transact with them at that point that they want to transact. The big data piece of this as well. How do we take all that information we know, and how do we make sure that we're able to understand, interpret it at that moment of truth that I've just described with the customer there, with our workforce? And again, I think the Internet of Things is going to be an increasingly important part in many of these small business sort of startups now. So again, a lot of these organizations now are looking at how we can embed technology and Internet of Things into those various components. I talked the other day about someone who was designing a toothbrush where actually the toothbrush would actually tell you when you needed to go to the dentist, which I thought was a bit scary personally. But that's the sort of thing that people are looking at now, which is how can we get all of these connected devices together to make people's lives easier, etc. We also have the supplier network as well. How do we make sure those buyers and suppliers are much easier to connect together? And if I'm looking at my SME as well here, how do I try and cut that time down and give them the best deal? So again, for an organization here, that connection into your supply base, into the supply chain, again, is absolutely critical to make sure these guys understand that. And then lastly, actually, the actual customer itself. So how do I make sure that customer experience is absolutely top in this engagement here? So you'll see on the right-hand side there, we have a lot of engagement, we have a lot of investment in these sorts of areas. So just to give you some example, we bought, I think, £15 billion worth of cloud companies recently to assist in this. So for example, in our success factors, we have around 40 million subscribers, people on the HR systems there that we're now doing on behalf of other companies. We have over 1 million business-to-business customers on the Ariba network, helping that sort of come together. We have the ability in this acquisition we did with Fieldglass, where we can bring together contingent labour calculations as well. So again, as a lot of organisations are outsourcing labour, how do you make sure you still become relevant and you still have that compliance, if you like, angle that you can't outsource? So again, we spend a lot of money in getting involved in these types of businesses where we can help small business as well come onto these systems because they don't have the money to get onto a large ERP system or to implement a large HR system, for example. So again, we're getting more and more involved in the value chains of these customers as well. So just to give you one example, this is something that a couple of banks have asked us to look at. And the reason I'm putting this up there, again, because some people say, yeah, I know SAP, I know what it does. These are the sorts of conversations now I'm being asked to be involved in. So again, a particular bank here has been involved with saying, I'm obviously in the financial services industry here. I want to connect with my customers. And if I look at some of the SME businesses, where can I really add the value? So that differentiated element that I talked about earlier, where do I add that differentiated element of that conversation? And what they want to do is to say, basically, if I'm making widgets in the middle of England, the last thing I want to think about is my bank account, my suppliers, my staff, my expenses. I want to make widgets, and I want to make the best widgets, and I want to make sure I really hone that process and make exactly what my customers want. And 50, 60, 70% of my time is on actually running my business. So how can I enable that type of engagement? So if you look on the right-hand side, what I've just covered previously there, we have the Business One solution that we call it, where we can put ERP in the cloud. And some banks are talking to us about taking that for their customers, creating the forms, creating the detail in that Business One. They pass through to their customers so that when you onboard them, it comes up in the same format, so it makes the onboarding easier. And potentially, because they're doing the same forms for balance sheet, profit and loss, for cash flow, etc., business plans, it's easier for you to assume or to take them onto your business and also easier to make those credit decisions. Also have an agreement where you have an ability to look at the receivables and payables in that relationship. You can make better credit decisions and even do things like give them forward value of those transactions, for example, because you know what's coming in. So again, that's one element. Next one, Ariba there. So we have 1 million business-to-business customers on here. How many banks here spend over £1 billion, or billion euros, shall I say, a year? I think huge numbers of people would put their hands up and say that's the case. I know all the banks I work for, it's many, many billions in IT spend. Why are we not utilising that buying power, potentially, to pass through to our customers? Potentially, new sources of revenues for the banks, opportunity for our SME customers to get a better deal as a pass-through in those types of relationships. Again, organisations may be looking at how I'm going to compare against other industries. Potentially, I might be looking to grow. So I might be looking to grow, but taking contract people, for example. So how does that contingent workforce capability being able to be looked after? Again, that field glass component we brought in there. And then lastly, on the expenses there in Concur. So we have this capability now to do expenses. I don't know if any of you use it, but it's a fantastic solution there. Again, an acquisition we bought, a cloud company. You just take photos of your expenses and it uploads into the system, so you can do it when you're out on the road. I find it very, very useful personally. Instead of giving SMEs a payment card, why not do the expenses for them? Again, with the network of businesses that you have within the banks, and again, you can take a margin off of that as well. So again, some organisations are saying we have the potential here to outsource a lot of those processes that are not value adding to these SMEs. I can take them on as the bank. So again, I just wanted to bring that up to you today. It's not the main purpose, but just to give you some idea, I think, of how the business models potentially could change, who could be involved in it, why we think it's important to get much more involved and ingrained in that customer value chain. We're not executing transactions anymore, we're providing real value. And that value is going to be in help, it's going to be in financial terms, it's going to be in relationship terms. It's not just about executing the transaction in here. So, how do we actually do that? And maybe some other ways that we can look at this, if that big grand scheme there is not potentially something that you might be looking at. We also see, as well as those applications though, that banks want to be more agile in the development agenda they have themselves. So we've come up with this concept called we call it the HANA Cloud Platform, HCP. Apologies, but we have to have a 3-letter acronym from a software company. So HCP is what we call it internally. And what this is a cloud environment for you to be able to develop your own applications, so a quick, rapid development environment. So what we're going to show you today with Jean-Luc, my colleague here, is we're going to concentrate on the user experience piece, and we're going to look at a personal loan. So we're going to look at how quickly we can set something up in that particular environment. So we call it Splash, but it's just one element of this HANA Cloud Platform. Again, what we see here is the ability to take standardized applications that maybe you all know and love, maybe some of them we previously showed you in the cloud there, and how do we supplement it with the value-adding pieces where we can use our scarce IT resource that shouldn't be working on those other things we just talked about previously, and how do we make sure they're targeted at the real value-adding things for our customer. So again, this environment that we have has all sorts of other elements in it as well. So it has integration APIs, predictive analytics, it has development operations in there, the ability to do collaboration, as I mentioned, mobile, Internet of Things. So again, all sorts of other bits and pieces in there you can investigate and look at your leisure. But again, I think this is important in how you build something where other people can collaborate with you, as I mentioned before. So how do we make and break those value chains? How do we make and break the differentiation that you want as an individual? So, as we, I think, covered previously, we do announce today this joint engagement with Efma. I must say it's been a particularly nice engagement. Sometimes when you link up with other companies, it's quite a difficult thing. I think both our team and the Efma team have really enjoyed working on this. It's been very collaborative. I'll just show you a couple of fleeting bits of it, and then we'll get into the demo. And then I think Efma will just show you the actual site on the web as well. So basically, this is what we're actually saying. And it would be wrong of us to say you have to use our tool in this, but we do give you the opportunity to use this as well if it's something that's of interest to you. So you can either take your own development platforms that you already have, or you can look at this HANA Cloud Platform application that we have. And again, there's some real innovative companies out there that are using this now. I think Jean-Luc will mention it, but I think we have about 450, I think, in the beta version 4 of this. We then look at building those apps, or you look at building those apps, and that will really take a case of developing them, then posting them up there, and then competing with your peers, really, just to see what we can come up with for the SME market. We are going to provide some support for that as well. So again, if it's just an area of interest for you, and this is not specifically an IT piece, all right? So business users, advanced business users can get on here as well and have a look at this. This is not designed so that you're looking at IT staff to do this. So we'll be able to give you a one-day onboarding for this solution if you're a bank. If you're a fintech, we have the equivalent of that, which we call a startup focus as well. So we can take you through what the environment is and how you would use it, etc. We also provide support from a technical team as well for this. If you get any things that you want to talk about or want to discuss with somebody, we're able to do that as well. And then lastly, a full set of documentation around this as well. So again, the absolute support you need to be able to come into that development environment. This is the website itself. We'll cover this in a little bit more detail a bit later on with Laurence, I think, hopefully she's here now, so we can cover that with her in a little bit. And I think I would encourage you to go and look at this, have a look around it, and maybe get some of your guys to sign up to it. It is the opportunity, I think, to be able to look at innovation, look at where that differentiation that I mentioned before is able to be built, and then how you link it into those current systems that you have.